In this video I'm going to show you the difference between the 5D Mark I, the 5D Classic and the 5D Mark IV. I've used the 5D Mark I for a very long time. I've had the 5D Mark IV I think for about a month now. I've been trying it out, I've done one wedding, so I just thought I'd share with you what's been going on and if I'm going to keep the 5D Mark IV. And I've also bought another camera, which is the Canon 100D. It's got the STM lens on, so it's got the 18-55 STM. That's going to be my sort of benchmark camera to judge the others by now. I'm just really asking the question, do we really need to be spending all this money on these cameras? So this might help you if you're thinking about buying a 5D Classic or a 5D Mark IV. And I'll just share my thoughts and we'll go through the images. So the first image is a 5D Classic. So at 28mm on the 24-105 f4, but that's the Mark I lens. That's my standard backup camera setup for weddings now. So just bear that in mind. I've got the 24-105 on that, and that's going to stay on there. The second camera is the 5D Mark IV, 24-105. That's got the Mark II lens on it. Optically very similar, the Mark I and the Mark II, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. As you can see, this one zoomed into 31mm. So obviously I haven't put this on the tripod, I've just had the cameras on my shoulder, just had a few minutes. These were taken within seconds of each other using 200 shutter, 1/200th shutter speed, f11 and ISO 200. So these are the two cameras we're going to compare, and the lenses maybe, but the benchmark camera, if you like, is something I think I bought for £185, so you know, very reasonably priced camera. Love this little camera, I owned it for a long time when it first came out and sold it for some reason, I have no idea why, but I bought it again the other day. So this is going to be the reference camera. This 18-55, 3.5 to 5.6, so we're stopping that down to f11, a couple of stops just to get the best out of the lens. And that's at 18mm, but just to let you know, with that one I've cropped in just to make them very similar, so I'm being a bit nasty to the 100D really, but as you'll see, this incredible little camera keeps up no problem at all. So again, 200th, f11, 200 ISO, so the same ISO across all of them. Different lenses, but you know, this might interest you. Let's go through them. So I know the 5D Classic file really well, and as the images came in, I actually took two different people and showed them these images on the screen. Obviously they couldn't see the information which camera I was using, and just to let you know, as they came into Lightroom and I showed them over and over again randomly, and I changed the numbers of the images, they all chose the 5D Classic file. The comments went, there's a lot of detail in the highlights, which 5D is known for, so the original Classic camera for wedding dresses is amazing, and that's why I like it. But also the absolute sharpness coming out of this camera. So, you know, this is only something I've heard, but apparently the low pass filter was changed through the different 5Ds, so mine's a later 5D, but not really late. I say it was in the middle, this 5D, just to let you know. But the sharpness you get straight out the camera without even using sharpening in Lightroom is quite incredible. As you can see from the history, I've done a lot of different things to this file. We'll go through that at the end and the history, and we'll bring it back in. But overall comments have been from other people, and you know, what I see is an incredible amount of sharpness that comes out of this camera. 5D Mark IV, I have to say, when I first saw the file, this is the 5D Mark IV file, they always require a lot of work. I'm getting used to that now. I've extended my edit time for weddings for this camera. I wouldn't say I've doubled it. I think I'll, you know, probably a third on top. So they just require more work, but the final file is really good. Wasn't the favourite file when people saw it coming in and I showed it to them, but you know, having my eyes and what I'm used to, once you play around with the file, it's absolutely fine. Just general comments now. As far as the 100D is concerned, quite an astonishing little thing. Look, now that's the crop I've done on the 18 to 55. We're at f11, stop down, 2 stops really. The quality's come out the lens, and wow, is all I can say. The 100D file is amazing. So I've been looking at images a long time, and yeah, this thing is astounding, to be honest with you. So I'm really impressed with the little lens. I'm going to keep this combination now. It's going to be my walk around lens for National Trust properties, doing anything that, you know, just for fun really. Not that I wouldn't use this for professional photography. It's going to be in my bag for weddings, and I'm going to put it on the 70 to 200 f4, like a body cap body really. It's so lightweight, I might as well just have it on there just to play around with. But general comments on this is the separation of the greens wasn't so great, so I played around with that a little bit. The white balance was different to the other two, so if I scroll up you might be able to see this, but we're at 5300 white balance, whereas with the other two 5150. Only a small difference, but I found there was a difference between the cameras, but especially the 100D, so just had to tweak the white balance to bring it in line with the others. Separation of greens is now fine. As I say, the sharpness of this lens at f11, I'm not going to bother to go down to 5.6. This lens is going to fall apart on the edges. Well, I assume it is. But at f11, no problem at all. So it's a good landscape, general photography, day out camera. I know I'm not reviewing that one now, but just to get over that so we can move on to the other two, the 100D is holding up no problem at all. So let's get on to the 5D Classic, because I've never really, well, out of all the videos, I don't think I've ever had an image up where I've discussed the file and why I like it. Let's go back to the import, so where it comes in. So it's come in, and I've had to pull this in line with the 5D Mark IV file because I went 31mm, etc. So just have a little look at this file. I mean, it's obviously 5650 Kelvin with a white balance, so it's a bit warm. I didn't fix that till later on. But as far as a file that you can just use straight out of the camera, this is the benefit to the 5D. Some highlight details being lost apparently, but we haven't got the signal and we are fine on the graph. So what I did slowly is I just pulled the highlights back in so you can see them come back in. That's a general tweak I do with the 5D Classic. It's sort of a one slider type setup. So when I'm doing weddings, I'm just recovering highlights. So I'm exposing to the right, which means to the right of the graph. I'm actually slightly overexposing normally. So I'm blowing the highlight on the wedding dresses, then I'm recovering. Now, the highlight detail and the top end, the right hand side of the graph, that's where the 5D Classic really shines, and that's why I love it. And the mid-tones stay there. Really good mid-tones and incredible sharpness, as you'll see in this image. Look, straight out the camera. We're at 200 there. Let's go a little bit more. I mean, it's falling apart there due to pixels, but that's a massive image on the screen there. So that's probably 20 by 24 on the wall at the minute. So the main benefit to the 5D file is the fact it comes out the camera, you recover some highlights, and that's about it. So that's why it's such a good wedding stroke portrait lens and great for wedding businesses. I was talking to someone the other day and they feel the same way as me. So they've got a portrait business, and as soon as they need a new camera, they just buy the 5D Classic again, because it's just right out the camera and you don't fiddle around with it. Let's carry on. So I recovered some whites then. So the recovery slider used to be in the early Lightroom, just to let you know. You might remember that, and that did whites and highlights together. I really like the recovery slider, one slider, but now they split it up. Well, they did a while ago. Between the two, you have to do 2 slides. So I've got -97, -26 to recover the highlights. I've cropped it. Let's have a look what we've done. We've gone in a little bit there. I've tweaked as I've gone along. I've done the Chromatic Aberration tweak purely because on the right hand side. I always do that with this side, remove chromatic aberrations. To be honest, the 24 to 105 is pretty good. At f11, you know, it's fine, but I shoot a lot of 5.6 at weddings, mainly 5.6, occasionally f4 inside dark churches. So and then I've enabled the profile, so that'll give you some idea of the profile correction on the lens there. So we've got some barrel distortion when we're at 28mm, and that's just corrected it slightly, flattened things out, looks fine. Colour temperature there I've taken off. Let's have a look what I did take off. We've gone, yeah, 5217 at that stage, so I'm feeling it's a bit warm, so we've taken some off. Let's carry on going. White balance again, I'm thinking it's too warm. This is it shows you what I really do. I'm just thinking, is it too warm, is it too cool? I've gone 5200 plus 7, and I figured that around 5200 was going to be where I wanted to be with the file. Let's carry on. Now I did muck around with sharpening. It doesn't really need much sharpening, to be honest with you. I went over the top here. I don't normally touch it. So to give you an idea, let's scroll on the right. Let's go to, there we go, plus 70. Yeah, I was mucking around with sharpening. And I wouldn't normally muck around with any of this, to be honest with you, with the 5D file, the Classic. Anyway, I put plus 70 in. To be honest, that's way over the top on sharpening. It's not something I normally do with a portrait, but it's a, you know, a file that's going to be printed. Yeah, gone over the top, but don't worry about that. So 40 would be fine for sharpening. So I'm cropping it about again to try and get it similar to the 5D Mark IV. Get to the end there, and that's my final file. I've pulled the whites, I've noticed, back to, there we go. So I've pulled the whites back, minus 65 on the white. So as you can see, the key, let's go down through the right hand side if you can see that. 5500 Kelvin I've ended up at. No, I didn't. I know I didn't. Scroll a bit further, and this is the final file. 5150 and plus 11. So that's really a daylight image. It was a daylight day. Daylight white balance. Recovered the highlights right down, which is standard. Recovered the wedding dress. Minus 65 on the whites. You could tweak around with that, we won't bother now. Haven't touched the blacks, this is an important one. Haven't touched the shadows. Haven't touched the blacks. And this is what shocked me about the 5D Mark IV, is I'm having to muck around with that. But bear with me, don't really touch anything with Vibrance or anything like that. The profile, by the way, is Adobe Color. I would normally use the neutral profile for weddings, but that's portraits. This particular image, obviously we're doing landscapes and a building. So, yeah, voice is going now, that's a good. So let's carry on. So I haven't really touched it too much, don't muck around with tone curves. HSL, nothing there. Sharpening, as I say, I went up to 70, but to be honest with you, over sharpened this image. Could have been 40. Stick radius at 1. Detail 25. Just give you some idea. Luminance noise, haven't had to do any noise reduction at all. We're at 200 ISO with the 5D, don't need to touch it. Colour always comes in at 25 anyway. I haven't really mucked around with that. Let's carry on down. Chromatic aberration, a lens profile for the, there we go. So we've pretty much, you know, I've done more than I would ever do with the file if it was a wedding, to be honest. It's only to try and get this closer to the 5D Mark IV. Let's go 5D Mark IV. Let's go back to the beginning. So remember, this is the same exposure, and let's go back to the beginning with the 5D. There we go. 5D Mark I comes in. I'd probably just recover the highlights, recover the whites. We're pretty much good to go, to be honest with you, just to give you an idea. 5D Mark IV, same exposure, 200 f11, same light. I guarantee you there was probably 5 seconds between these. It was a full blue day, no clouds, It looks like it's gone behind the clouds. So it looks like the sun's gone behind the clouds. Now we've got completely different colours, and we've got the same profile, Adobe Color. And this is what shocks me about this image. So it's annoying. And if you've got any comments about this and you're using the two cameras, I know a lot of people do use these two. See what you can say. Comment below, let me know. So, flat as a pancake. Imagine I've showed somebody this file or this file, and I appreciate, let's say I've shown them with the whites put back in, which is a standard fix. Very quickly put in. Now it's more contrast, more internal contrast, looks sharper, you can see through here. I've got the 5D Mark IV, completely different. Now we've got lots of detail. We haven't got that crispness, that sharpness, just to let you know. And along this reeds area, it's going to be hard to see on your screen. That's what I'm looking at, and that's what people like. Now just touching on this, what people react to, and what I keep saying people is because I have customers, it's that simple. So it's a business, and what I find people react to, they think sharpness is contrast basically. And people do react to contrast. And something they'll go, oh God, that's sharp. And you think, well, no, it's not. It's just, it's contrasty. So you're reacting to the contrast. And I'm aware of that. And this file is flatter. And we've had to work on it. Now, let's go down to the greens and you'll really see it here. This flatness. Let's come on this side and come over to the greens. Vibrance. Now it separates the greens out better, the 5D Mark IV. And I do believe there's more in there. There's more in the file. We know there's more pixels, the bit depth. This raw file is a better file in theory. But it's how far I'm having to come with it to get it back to where I need it to be. That's the annoying thing. Anyway, I'll stop moaning. Let's carry on going. Highlights were recovered. Whites were recovered. Here's the big one now. Shadows were boosted. Shadows were altered again. Exposure was pumped up. Now you can start to see once I pump exposure into it, we're getting closer. Whites, then I've gone on the sharpening. And sharpening again, trying to make it like the Mark 1. I'm going in, doing a bit of cropping just to get it a similar size. Big one here is plus, and you'll see this a lot. I've noticed this with people when they're editing this file. Suddenly you have to put a load of contrast in. Now look at my sliders on the right. I'm putting exposure in, contrast in, highlights, whites are down. And I've always wondered why everyone's fiddling around with the right hand side. It's always fascinated me for 15 years, to be honest, with a lot of these cameras. And I watch videos online and people are just mucking around with the sliders all the time. And to be honest, forgive me, because I understand now, because you've got to try and get these modern files, the last 5 years, you've got to muck around with them. So I'm carrying on, sharpening, a bit more of an exposure boost, did something there. Then I've gone color temperature. So I've brought this down to 5150, and now let's have a look at the difference. Let's pull this one on a little bit, pull it into a similar area. You can see the progression of what I was doing. Right, now we've got them looking similar. So then I've gone tint, I think, and I've gone chromatic aberration, lens profile. Let's scroll down, keep going, fiddling around with lens and enable lens profile. And I've got to the end there, and that is 5150 with the, let's have a look at our sliders all over the shop now. So I have got there with it, and I got a file out of it. Let's set this one up, so we're finishing. But it took a lot more work. And that's what I would take away from this. If you're doing single images like this, and you're going out in the landscape, you're a landscape photographer, no problem at all with the 5D Mark IV. If you're, you might be at 2,000 images for a wedding. I mean, I think I'm usually 1000-ish now for a decent wedding. So just bear that in mind. I've got 1000 images across here that I've got to muck around with. So the 5D Mark I, the Classic, just to tell you about image quality, comes out sharper. Something going on with the low pass filter. There's that sharpness. To get the 5D Mark IV up with sharpness, you have to throw a load of sharpening at it. The absolute detail in the file, just to let you know, is obviously it's a 30 megapixel file compared to a 13 with the 5D Mark I. Let's just do an average sort of look at that for you. Let's get back to the other one. So that's, pull that over. Computer's slowing down now. Just to give you an idea, you couldn't really tell these two apart. I know I'm zooming in a little bit with a 5D Mark IV. Let it catch up. It's because I'm recording video. Let it settle down. There is a tremendous amount of detail in these files once they're sharpened. So the 5D Mark IV, lots and lots of pixels, 30 megapixel, lots of information. They just need to be played around with a bit. But we're talking about a camera, to give you an idea, that second-hand price in the UK at the minute, 1,700. We're talking about a 15-year-old camera that, you know, if you got from me, I think I'm sending them out at 370 at the moment, and that's fully checked, fully sorted out. A later model, you might be able to get one for 200. You might be able to get one for 150 pounds. I mean, we're talking about night and day as far as pricing's concerned, and we're talking about a file that comes out of the camera right with a few tweaks. Now you could argue you're going to be sat behind Lightroom anyway, you might as well carry on and have a 5D Mark IV. I'm not saying don't. I'm running this season with the two of them. I love the 5D Mark IV. It's really, you know, there's so many things about it I really like. I just prefer the file at the 5D Mark I because I don't have to edit it so much. So I hope that helps. I'm going to leave it there for now. We've just done image quality. It gives you a few ideas. I'm going to go on to dynamic range next. So I'm going to do another video about the dynamic range. This is from the same day, so I did this yesterday. The dynamic range, that's well worth watching. If you see that video pop up, I'll link to it at the end of this one when it's up. Try and find it. Dynamic range, 5D Classic versus 5D Mark IV. I had a lesson online where I was teaching someone the other day. They had 5D Classics, had 5 of them. And they asked about dynamic range. Well, watch that video and that'll help you. So we'll leave it there for today.